Welcome to the International School of Tailoring. Today I'm going to be giving you a beautiful gift. That gift is pain relief, but I'm not here to sell you any drugs or medication. I'm also not here to sell you snake oil, okay? Today, the gift that I'm going to be giving you is going to be a sleeve draft. A sleeve draft that is going to remove your headaches, your pains, your long, late nights. When I was an apprentice, I realized that one of the biggest troubles, the most difficult components of a jacket are the sleeves. But not because the sleeves are inherently difficult. They have difficulties, but they're not that difficult if they are explained well. If the method in which you draft them and construct them is sound and logical and understandable. But because we don't have that in our industry, and we don't have enough people sitting, thinking through all these problems and how to simplify them. Instead, we have people just copying things and just doing them for the sake of it. We haven't resolved these issues. I knew that I didn't want to live my life as a tailor who's going to struggle with sleeves every single time. There had to be a way. If nature would construct a sleeve and it would be perfect, how would it be? So, in an attempt to solve this problem, I asked myself a question. And that question was, if all the paper around me could just walk up and assemble itself into a sleeve pattern as if it was fabric, so as if a fabric sleeve was being made up, what kind of a system would that be? So I experimented, I worked things out, I thought it through, and here we are today. This method is going to be based on two things. One, it's going to be the armhole of the jacket regardless of the shape or the size. It doesn't really matter which system you use to get the body parts of the jacket. All you need to have are the front panel, side panel, and the back panel, and an armhole. Second thing is it incorporates the construction methods and techniques that you're going to go through on the fabric. So in this case, a false forearm is going to be stretched. Well, you can't replicate that on paper, can you? Well, you can. I'm going to show you how. So that when you make the pattern, it's actually made to be stretched on the forearm seam of the top sleeve. All of these will allow you to have a sleeve that fits perfectly, is easy to adjust, hangs as the arm of the individual would hang, and is in harmony with the armhole. So, if you are ready, please join me to follow this system step by step. You can already see that the lapel section is... I have prepared a side panel, a back panel, and a front panel. Obviously, we're about to draft a set of sleeves, and therefore we need to make sure that we have a front panel, a back panel, and a side panel that has a clear chest line. This is extremely important. What we don't know is what the depth is of our armhole. And we have to prepare our front, side, and back panel in a way that resembles the final jacket on the body. So, what do? We are going to place these next to one another. And I haven't added any other details but the necessary relevant ones. So, here we have the chest lines, horizontal lines, and we also have these dashed lines that represent the sewing line, okay? So what we are going to do is to align the chest lines as one horizontal line, while the top edge of our pattern matches the sewing lines and allows them to overlap. The front panel goes over the side panel like this, and the side panel goes over the back panel like this. And we are going to start to match the sewing lines at the edge of the pattern, okay? We're not going to align them exactly at the angle that they are at. We're just going to align them at the top edge right here and right here, okay? Then we're going to make sure that our chest line runs as one straight line from the front to the back. And if we have to refine the position of our patterns, then we do so. The sewing lines are overlapping at the edge right here and at the edge right here. What we now have to do is to tape these areas so that they don't change position. Here, here, here at the top, and I'll put two more slightly lower. This is how the armhole will be when the garment is wrapped around the body. Okay, the chest line is always drafted so that when the garment is put together, it wraps around the body, being parallel to the floor from the front, side, and back angle. Okay, now the next thing to do for us is to join the shoulders as if the garment is made up. If you want to do that, I recommend you mark a seam off the front shoulder at both ends, the neck point and the shoulder point, and do the same thing on the back. Have a piece of tape ready, bring these together, like so, match the front neck points, match the shoulder points, make sure that the sewing lines are aligned, hold that well in place, put one tape here and another one at the other end, and one in the middle, just to be safe, like that. Now it's as if this is a made-up garment. Then what I like to do to keep it as realistic as possible is to take a shoulder pad, just an ordinary shoulder pad that is meant to be for the side that you have, and insert that shoulder pad, kind of like bent, in here, like so. Now this shoulder pad is going to open up the armhole in the most realistic sense, and is going to allow you to measure the depth of the armhole. Normally I hold this up in the air, but this is a perfect way to do it. Look, this is a starting point. You're never going to be 100% accurate. You're going to be 95% accurate. That's already very accurate, okay? But the overall shape and the style and all of that, you have to refine on the fitted garment that is on the body, okay? This will get us 95% as close as we can. So, grab a ruler and just measure right from this edge of your paper straight down to the base of the armhole. I'm seeing something about 6 1/4, okay? Make a note of that. So I'm gonna write next to my board 6 1/4. Remove the shoulder pad and remove the tapes on the shoulder only. Then I want you to lay your patterns in front of you like this. Now that we know the depth of the armhole, we can actually begin marking our pitch marks, which are crucial to the correct hang of the sleeve. The front panel should be overlapping the side panel, like this, okay? Make sure everything is flat and you've taped this well enough so that this remains a straight line. How do we mark our pitch lines? The depth of our sleeve was 6 1/4, so measure from the base 6 1/4 upwards and make a mark there. That is the height of our armhole, okay? Then divide this measure, so 6 1/4, by 2. That gives us 3 1/8. Mark a horizontal line, and this is the middle of the armhole. And I always like to have the top of the side seam exactly in the middle of the armhole, because I believe that that is the right seam placement for the body, okay? For all bodies. Then I want you to divide each one of these sections by 2 again. So if we measure from the top to the middle, which was 3 1/8, that's going to be, half of that is going to be 1.5 1/16. This is the upper quarter section of the armhole, okay? This line that we have marked is going to be our back pitch. I'll mark this as a horizontal line, parallel to the chest line as the back pitch. We're going to do the same thing here at the lower half. So again, 1.5 1/16. And this time we're going to mark the front pitch. Now make sure your pattern is not moving because we don't want to lose this distance, all right? Now that you've established this, what you can do is establish the correct hanging coordinate of the sleeve. For that, take a square ruler, make sure that the square ruler is parallel to your chest line, and bring that all the way to the very front point, this edge of your front side, on the front pitch line. Align this so that it's parallel to your chest line, and mark roughly around the hip area a vertical line. This pitch mark indicates where the arm is most likely going to be hanging, at the wrist. Now it's time to draft our sleeves. To make sure that nothing moves here, I'll just put a piece of tape here against the board, here on the shoulder, and here on this shoulder. The way we're going to draft the sleeve is as if we are building the sleeve, as if we are making the sleeve as we are drafting it on paper pattern. So here I have an example sleeve, okay? This is a made-up sleeve. When you look at it from the inside, you have your false forearm running all the way through. You have this roll of the sleeve that is rolling inwards, and you have your hind arm right here. We want to draft the sleeve so that the chest line matches that of the body, and that this wrist section of the forearm matches the front of the armhole, because that is pretty much for all people where their arm is going to be hanging, unless they have a broken arm or something that is out of the ordinary, like that. So what do we do? Well, we're going to need a piece of paper that is about wide enough for your sleeve. I have a piece of paper about 30 inches now. If you take your armhole and triple that, so you have 3 times the width of your armhole, that's roughly what I have here as well. Fold this in half. Now you have top sleeve and under sleeve. Top sleeve is the paper on the top, under sleeve is the paper at the bottom. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to look at where the top is of our crown. This is going to be the highest point of the armhole. And we're going to lay this so that we have enough room at the top right here. So this is where the crown of the armhole is, the highest point. We're going to leave about 2 inches or so, enough room for us to play around. Then, as we do that, we're just going to make a small mark where the chest line is as a notch, just to know where we're roughly at. And based on that, we're going to mark a curve, which is going to be with our rulers that you can get on our website. And this is going to be our forearm seam. So this is going to be this seam right here. Mark a line. And at this moment, the orientation doesn't really matter, as long as you have the deepest point roughly somewhere around the waist area. Our elbows are usually in line with our lowest ribs, and the lowest ribs are usually where the side suppression is, okay? Now that we have that, this is, by the way, not representative of the chest line per se. It's just an indicator of where this is. We're first going to make a cut into this mark, a little bit into our forearm seam. This is just going to be a notch so that we can align them later on. And we're going to cut both of them along this line. This ensures that our forearm seams have the same curve. And wherever you have a fold, cut that open so that the paper is free to move separately from one another. Top sleeve, under sleeve. Here we had a little notch just to remind ourselves of where the orientation is. And we're going to start by the top sleeve. Now, if you've watched the theory lesson that I've produced on sleeves, I've explained to you exactly why a false forearm is technically more correct than a 50-50 sleeve. Therefore, we are going to cut sleeves with a false forearm. When you make up a sleeve that has a false forearm, you have to stretch the forearm seam of the top sleeve. You do this to transfer the concave shape that you have on the cut edge of the pattern onto the surface of the fabric so that you create a negative surface curve. This means that the fabric can roll onto itself while also having a concave surface shape, okay? It's like a saddle. Now, you cannot stretch paper. When you stretch your fabric, you are making that section longer relative to the rest, okay? And that allows it to fold and create a concave edge on the surface. But there is something else that we can do with paper, and that is make snips into it to release that tension. And that is going to be identical to stretching. We know that we have a seam allowance, which is about 1 centimeter for the forearm. And we know that our forearm, our false forearm, which is the amount that is folded inwards, is about 2 centimeters. So 1 centimeter for the seam, 2 centimeters for the forearm, for the false forearm, that gives us 3 centimeters. In imperial measures, that's about 1 inch and an eighth. I want you to mark 3 centimeters or 1 inch and an eighth all the way from the top to the bottom, parallel to the edge that you have on your top sleeve pattern. Now, once you've done that, I want you to make snips into it right up to the line that you've drawn, and the distance between the snips should be about 2 inches. Okay, so that's 2 finger creases. Then what I want you to do is to flip this over and begin folding your edge up to the line that you have drawn and the snips that you've made. Now that you've made these snips, they allow the material to open. It's as if you are stretching out the paper, because this is what you have to do eventually on your fabric anyway, okay? This is us working in line with nature, not against it. So we are replicating the paper pattern exactly as the fabric sleeve would be, or at least as close as possible. That's done. What you are pretty much looking at right now is this view without the undersleeve being present, okay? This edge is this edge of your sleeve, okay? Now, 2 centimeters in gives us the sewing line, and that leaves us with 1 centimeter from this edge as our seam allowance. So, what I want you to do is to mark where that notch was, that little cut that we made. Mark a seam inwards from the edge. Do a little bit of that at the top. Doesn't have to be a specific place, as long as you can roughly see where your sewing line is going to be, and a little bit of that at the bottom, like so. Now, I want you to take your undersleeve and put that on top of your top sleeve, which is right here. And of course, the curves should be matching. Now, you also made a snip into your undersleeve, which is right here. Mark a seam in from the edge of your undersleeve paper, and do that along the top as well, and along the bottom, just like you did with the top sleeve. Now, find that snip that you had made on the undersleeve. Allow your sewing lines, what you have just marked a seam in, to overlap where that snip is. Now, the curve coordination is identical. Also, you've made other marks of your sewing lines. Align those as well, and make sure that your undersleeve is overlapping the top sleeve fold. Okay, so this is right here, and the top is matching as well. So top is matching, middle is more or less matching, and the bottom is matching, okay? Then what I want you to do is to tape this edge temporarily so it doesn't move. It's as if you are now sewing up the forearm seam. And make sure you put enough tapes there so that it doesn't open up. But these are all temporary. What you are looking at is exactly this section of the sleeve. So we have the edge, the concave edge that we have here on our top sleeve forearm, and we have this sewing line that we have marked all the way from top to bottom, more or less, which is going to be this, okay? Of course, on this fabric, the seams are pressed open, so technically this bit would be pressed inwards, but now they're just overlaying, okay? Now, let's move on to coordinating the sleeve together with the body. So, flip it over, and what I want you to do is to mark about 5/8, that's 1.5 centimeters, from the edge into your pattern on the front pitch line. What are we doing here and why? Well, imagine your sleeve is sewn in, okay? You will have a front roll right in front of the sleeve, right? That's the bespoke roll that we have on our jackets. Now, this roll is roughly, once the jacket is finished, if you pinch that on the double, is going to be 5/8 wide. Of course, you can make it wider or narrower, but for a rich full sleeve on a bespoke jacket, it's more or less going to be 5/8 wide. So this 5/8 indicates the width of the roll, which is going to be doubled eventually, right? Because we have 5/8 inside, and then if you wrap over, it's going to be 5/8 on the outside, okay? If I would pinch this from the edge of the crease to my finger point, that's 5/8 on the double. So 5/8 here, 5/8 here. Then what I want you to do is to bring the edge of your sleeve onto the forepart. Make sure you know where the highest point of your armhole is and leave enough space at the top, maybe like 2 or 3 inches, and align the edge of your sleeve with that mark that you made on the front pitch, that 5/8 mark. Once you've done that, hold that in place and now rotate your sleeve so that it aligns with where the wrist is going to be. Now your sleeve is hanging as the arm would hang. Put something heavy on it so that it cannot move, okay? It should not move from this point onwards. Then, what I want you to do is to make a small mark right here where the chest line of the forepart is, like so. I also want you to lift the top sleeve up and the undersleeve to see where the chest line is on the back. Look at where the undersleeve lays and mark the chest line of the back onto the inside of the undersleeve, like that. Okay? Just have this for your reference. We are not going to mark the chest line on this area of the top sleeve, okay? We're just going to do it on the undersleeve. Next thing that I want you to do is to mark where the highest point of the armhole is with a pencil, like this, and also mark the base of the armhole from where your front pitch starts all the way to where this deepest part of the curve is. And you have to just flip your paper pattern over, make these small dots until you have an idea of where it is. Try to be as accurate as you can. What we are doing now, it's as if we have made up the sleeve in a sense and sewn the sleeve already in the armhole at the right orientation. Now we want to just make sure that this entire sleeve is perfectly mirroring the armhole while it's hanging in the right orientation. That's the base of the armhole, that's the top of the armhole. The depth of our sleeve is the same as the armhole, so from here to here, plus a seam allowance, plus a little bit for a smooth roll or roping on the shoulders. Normally I add about 3/8, and if it's too much or too little, I'll just adjust. So 3/8 for the seam, 3/8 for the roll, okay? Now, what about the width? Because the sleeve is already set in the right orientation at the front, okay, right here, all we need to think about is how wide the sleeve has to be on this side. So we're not gonna add any width on the front anymore. This part is already made up. It's this part that is not made up. You see, we have here a hind arm, but here we still have open paper. We're gonna cut and shape that so that it looks like the sleeve that we want in the end. What we have to do is to mark the backside edge first, that's right here, and where the back pitch is. Make sure that you mark the back pitch exactly as you marked it on the body. Mark a faint line there. Now, from where this edge is, so the backside and the back pitch, where they meet, you're going to measure one seam, which is going to be for the forearm, one seam, which is going to be for the front sleeve run, one seam, which is going to be for the hind arm. Then, that's your seams. You're going to add 1/2 inch for the front roll across the upper part of the sleeve. So that 1/2 inch is for this part. When you pinch this, you're pinching roughly 1/4 on the double, which is going to be 1/2 inch. And another 1/2 inch for the back roll. When this is sewn into the armhole, if you pinch this, it's roughly going to be 1/4 on the double. Then a total amount of 1 inch, so something like that. And that is now from this edge all the way to here, the total width of our top sleeve as it should be. This is going to be the best starting point you are ever going to create. Now, that extra inch for extra movement is so that when the sleeve head roll fills this roll up and this roll, this is going to be pulled across. You want to have a little bit of room across here so that as the sleeve goes around the arm, it has a little bit of ease. You know, you don't want to have sleeves that look neat, but they are super tight across, okay? Now, we are going to mark our hind arm for our top sleeve. So that's going to be this line right here. We have to decide for how wide we want the cuffs to be and also how long the sleeves are going to be. Let's say our sleeves are 25 inches long. So if you take the highest point that you drafted for your sleeve, measure a seam down, so that's a seam off, and bring that roughly into the width that you are considering for your cuff. Let's say 25 is right here. That's the length of the sleeve. We should square this with the forearm seam edge that we have right here. Then we decide how wide we want the cuff to be. Let's say I want there to be a fist in there at least, you know, to match that. So roughly speaking, something like that. Whatever that measure is, that's about 5 3/4. Make a mark there, grab your ruler. This is the hind arm edge, pattern edge, and connect these two together. We want to draw the top sleeve run, which is going to be this run right here. And for that, we have to mark the same 5/8 that we have here one more time in front of our curve. Why? It's very simple. If our sleeve is sewn into the armhole and we have this roll, well, one half of that roll is on the outside, the other half is on the inside. If I would open the sleeve up, it would end up roughly here. So one roll is on the inside, this would be folded in. If you fold it out, it would sit right here. And we are going to draw, again, a faint line from this point into the upper part of our sleeve. Something like that. But I'm not going to draw this onto the body. It's just going to be on the sleeve. Our back pitch construction line is right here. And let me just erase all the other things which are unnecessary. If we want to know where the rest of this curve should end, so that once sewn it hits exactly the back pitch, we have to take a seam off. Let me do that with a pen, like that. And also a seam off where these two intersect, which is going to be pointed towards the top. This is going to be the sewing line of our top sleeve run. Now, if we add a seam allowance to that, that is where our point needs to finish. So we can go from here roughly into there. And you can always add a step here if you want, not necessary, as long as you know where your sewing lines are. So if we would sew up the hind arms and this run, our sewing lines will intersect exactly on the back pitch construction line, which is going to be right here. This way, we know where the back pitch should be. We know where we should pin the sleeve to, so that we are not guessing, should the back pitch be higher, should the back pitch be lower, and all of that time-wasting nonsense. Now, we have to cut out the hind arm of the top sleeve. So let me put this here carefully, erase all this unwanted lines, and only the top sleeve, okay? If you've made it this far, congratulations, you have now cut the hind arm of your top sleeve, okay? While this entire sleeve is somewhat sewn into this paper armhole, okay? Now what do we do? Well, usually the undersleeve needs to be a little bit bigger than the top sleeve. That will give us more room along the back side to distribute the ease in, because most of our movement is going to be forwards and upwards. And so you do need a little bit more fabric and material in that area. Therefore, we make the undersleeve usually slightly wider. How much? A good starting point, of course, this is dependent on your fabric. The thicker the fabric, the wider you can go. But I always use an inch of width. And then if it's too big, I'll go less. If it's not enough, I'll go more. So I'm going to measure an inch from where the edge is of my top sleeve hind arm over and make a mark. I'm also going to make a mark where the cuff is, just edge to edge. I'm not going to make that any bigger. It's only at the top. I'm going to remove this heavy object and I'm going to move the sleeve as naturally as it moves and match the top and the bottom where I have marked them. As I do this, what happens is the sleeve goes on a slight angle and goes downwards. Leave it, let it be like that. Now that I have this here, I'll put a heavy object on top so that it doesn't move, and I'll begin marking the hind arm of my undersleeve. So I'm using the same edge of my top sleeve hind arm to mark the undersleeve hind arm, because these two are going to be sewn together and you want perfect harmony between them. Like that. Now, while this is laying in this position, I'm also going to cut the cuffs. So I'll just press this flat, maybe even up in the air. It's a lot easier maybe. And I'll just cut both materials. So this is my top sleeve and my undersleeve. Just careful that you don't cut anything on your body pattern. And make sure that the object you have on your pattern is really heavy, because otherwise it will move. While my sleeve moves, see now there is a slight angle here. While my sleeve goes into the hind arm at the right orientation, I have to mark the chest line that I had and bring that into the chest line that I marked on the front. So this was the chest line on the undersleeve, this was the chest line on the top sleeve. Now you might be wondering, why do we use the chest line of the undersleeve to mark that of the top sleeve? Well, this is the reason. Let me put this aside. When you sew your sleeves and you put them seam to seam, and you are matching your front pitch to the armhole, for example, and the chest line that you have closest to the forearm seam is the one on the front. However, once you've sewn around and you've wrapped everything around and you come back, the chest line that you have the closest to your hind arms, both on the top sleeve and the undersleeve, is on the back pattern, okay? But something else happens. As you've seen, our top sleeve pattern moves towards the hind arm of the undersleeve, and when it does that, it moves downwards. So it deviates from the original chest line position. Now, if I had marked the hind arm chest line on the top sleeve, and I would move it to mark the width of my undersleeve, well, I would have deviated from the original. And so when I insert my sleeves, the chest line at the hind arm is always going to be lower than the body. But the undersleeve doesn't move. The undersleeve just stays where it is. So that's why we mark it on the undersleeve, because it goes in exactly like that. And that gives us a matching chest line on front and back. So what do we do now? Well, the body can pretty much go. I'll still keep these tapes in case I need them. Put this aside. And now it's time to continue with this. Just make sure that you have the front chest line, the dot that you made, and the one on the hind arm marked on the hind arm of the undersleeve. First thing I do is to cut the hind arm of the undersleeve. Now you can move this edge to edge and mark where your top sleeve chest line should be on the hind arm. Like that. So this is the correct one. This is the one that aligns with the body. Here it's slightly offset to the top because of this angle. So the wider our undersleeve was, the more severe that angle would be. But once they are sewn together, the top sleeve also goes to exactly the right orientation. So now we have to mark the chest line at the front for the undersleeve. So what do? We carefully open this up, allow it to lay flat, connect the chest line ends of the top sleeve first, and bring that by a seam into the undersleeve. Mark where your undersleeve chest line end is, which is going to be right here, and bring that as a straight line into that point that was a seam inwards. Like that. So now when you cut out your sleeves, the grain of the undersleeve, when sewn up to the top sleeve, is going to be exactly the same. If you cut your sleeve according to these formulas in books that have no consideration for makeup, you will end up with a top sleeve that has a grain going one way and an undersleeve that has a grain going completely the other way. These two should be exactly matching when it comes to their grain. Now that we've done that, that's chest lines sorted. Next thing, we have to now mark the run for the undersleeve. We already have that on the top sleeve. What do? Grab a pin or a sharp object and poke through this armhole base that you had marked. Doing this will transfer this run onto the undersleeve. So the undersleeve run matches exactly your armhole run. That's it. You don't need to do more than that. Also, I just realized I forgot something. My apologies. I did not mark the front pitch. Fortunately, that's an easy thing. We know where the chest line is, so that should match. We know that this edge should match the first 5/8 mark, and that the back pitch should be matching, and this chest line right here should be there. And this brings us in the back in the right coordinates. Your front pitch should just be transferred as a straight line like that onto your top sleeve. That's it. Now, once you have your top pitch, you have to poke a line through where the base of the armhole run intersects with your top pitch, so that you know on this side where it's going to be on the edge of your pattern. You will open up your sleeves, lay this upper part flat, like so, and connect this line that you poked through the front pitch to where your other line is, so that it's mirrored, okay? Now you know exactly where your true front pitch is. It's this one right here. This one you can remove. Now, we have to continue the top sleeve run into the base of the armhole. We are always going to follow the under sleeve run, because that is the closest to the armhole, that doesn't have any strange angles, and bring that into here, okay? Never bring this just into here and make all those changes. It's always the under sleeves run that you're gonna prioritize to mark your top sleeve. So from here, I'll take my graphite. This is going to be a seam off. This is the edge of the undersleeve forearm. This is a seam in. This is the point that I have to connect and bring that as close as I can into the top right here, like so. Make this line a little bit bolder so you can see. It looks like this. So it's very important for you to know where the edge of your undersleeve forearm is and where the base of the armhole intersects with the sewing line of your undersleeve's forearm seam, okay? It's not just a random thing. And that, you have to hit that point. So you bring this here, into the top sleeve. Once you've done that, you can pretty much take all the tapes off and continue to the other side. Carefully take the tapes off and remove them. Of course, here you can continue your run based on the line that you made, like that. And where you have one seam in intersecting with your run, that's where you're going to put a step, like that. Now for the hind arm, to mark the rest. Mark a seam in on the chest line of the top sleeve hind arm, and a seam in on the chest line of the undersleeve hind arm. Allow these 2 points where the intersections are to overlap, so it's as if you are laying the sewing lines on the sewing lines, and where your back pitch construction line is, on the same area, mark a seam in so that you know where to align it. Align the sewing lines at the top as well, and now this time your top sleeve run will determine the continuation into the base of the armhole. Why is that? Well, it's because we have the back pitch construction and the intersection lines here. So it's a lot easier to see on the top sleeve where the back pitch is. What I'll do is I'll grab my pencil, hold this in place, and continue this into the base of the armhole. And here you can also mark a seam in where that edge of the pattern intersects. Just cut that off as a step or keep it as a point. It doesn't matter, as long as you know where your sewing lines are. Now, you can cut out this line, like so. Don't leave a pointy part. Just cut so that you have a step of one seam, 1 centimeter, like that. And you can do the same here as well. I prefer to do it, so that's one. Now, you have to tape close all these cuts that we have made that simulated the stretching of our material. Do this carefully and make sure that they are not open as you tape them or overlapping. Like that. And now cut the top sleeve run. And you can cut a step there as well. Or you can just continue cutting until you meet the edge. Again, doesn't matter. Now, last thing, where is the top pitch, meaning the highest point on the sleeve? The easiest way to find out is, of course, by eye, if you have a trained eye, but if you want some sort of a formula for that, you match your sleeves together so that you can see the entire width. You're going to take some sort of a protractor or a pattern master, and you're going to align where the back pitch area is, or even slightly lower, and make sure you have equal amounts either side. Where your 0 point is, that's where your top pitch is. It's usually the highest point on your sleeve. So I should be maybe a little bit over. You can just bring this over like that. It's not really a very important pitch mark when it comes to putting the garment together, but it helps you when you are altering your sleeve. So, my dear friends, this is how you draft a sleeve that is based on the construction that you're going to go through with the fabric. It's made while the forearm was stretched, the sleeve was put on the body as it should be in the right orientation, and if you would make this sleeve up, you will notice that the forearm seam of the top sleeve is slightly shorter. Well, that's because when you stretch this out with the iron, it will become longer and match that base of the undersleeve, okay? Don't forget to extend your chest lines, and so when you take a seam off, this is really where your front pitch is. And once you've done that, you're ready to enjoy a very well put together sleeve. So that was the draft. As you've seen, it's fairly intuitive. It's based on shapes and positions and not dot-to-dot systems and mathematical calculations. Do you want to see this sleeve in action? Check out this clip. Now I can properly put the sleeves in and make sound judgments about them. Let's do that. I have now put in the sleeves according to the right orientation. Have a look at the sleeves. This clip is from our How to Make a Bespoke Jacket series, in which I show you how to make a bespoke jacket. For those of you who are new to this channel and are seeing me for the first time, my name is Reza, and together with my Mowgli behind the camera, we produce high quality, in-depth, strictly technical, bespoke tailoring educational videos. These are available to you and the entire world for free on YouTube. If you want to see the full picture of what we do and you want to become a bespoke tailor, or you already are a bespoke tailor, you just want to have a deeper understanding of the techniques, visit our website, internationalschooloftailoring.com. There you will have access to a lot of free resources, to products, to a community, and I think it's a good idea to check it out. As for now, my name is Reza, with Mowgli behind the camera, and I hope to see you again in the next video or more often. Take care.